Experiment 2 is all about measuring and transferring liquids and solutions. In this experiment, we'll be using a number of different types of glassware, and the main safety considerations for glassware are the same as they were last week. Always check for chips and cracks, never dry the glassware with a paper towel, and make sure you dry your glassware by setting it upside down. The procedure for this week gets you to practice using a burette, and you'll use a burette to dispense exactly approximately 20 milliliters of solution into a beaker. And what this really means is you'll just take an initial reading of a filled burette, and then you'll add 20 milliliters to that number and dispense until you get pretty close to that number. You'll then stop adding solution into your beaker, and you'll take another reading, a V final reading, on your burette. And the difference between those two values, final minus initial, is the amount of solution that you've added to the beaker. And once you're finished adding the solution to the beaker, you'll practice reading graduations on a beaker. So you should read the volume of the solution in your beaker. And beakers are terrible measuring devices, so you probably won't have any decimal places for this number. Then you'll dispense another exactly approximately 20 milliliters into the beaker. So when you do this, the initial volume that you record in the burette should be very, very close to the V final from your first trial, assuming that the burette's not leaking. Then you add 20 milliliters to that number, and then you dispense until you've added about 20 milliliters. And once you've added those 20 milliliters, you stop adding solution, and you take a reading on your burette. Again, the difference between the final and initial values represents how much you've added into the beaker. And if you add those two delta V values, those two additions or dispensations into the beaker, if you add those two values together, you should find the total volume of water added into the beaker. You should then practice your ability to read the graduations on a beaker by finding the volume of water inside the beaker. This volume should be about double the initial volume. This volume is also the total volume of water inside the beaker. The next thing you should do is practice pouring solutions from one container to another. So you should take the beaker full of water and transfer that water into a graduated cylinder, and then record the volume of water inside the cylinder. And graduated cylinders are somewhere in between beakers and burettes in terms of precision, so you should be able to estimate a decimal place in the volume. The second part of the procedure is very similar to the first, in that you're going to be practicing dispensing from a burette, transferring solutions by pouring, and measuring volumes in beakers and graduated cylinders. The biggest difference between the first part of the procedure and this part is that you're only going to do one addition of water from the burette into the beaker. This time you just add 40 milliliters of water from the burette into the beaker. You then read the volume of water inside the beaker, you then transfer the water to the graduated cylinder, and then you measure the volume of water inside that cylinder.